start it off? Have a sausage, bacon, chops, cut meat, ribs, bacon, and a rocket. Do you eat a lot of pork? Not really, no. And can I ask, how are you feeling at the moment about your finances, about the cost of living? Do you think it's easing up? No, I don't. I think it's getting worse. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. But everyone's struggling, especially with food. I live on my own and single parent, and it's really sort of tough trying to sort of keep my head above water at the minute, and it's quite an amazing battle. There's a lot of driving just going towards scraps, and so yeah, taxes, major.
I'm selling Irish white pudding, black pudding, best bacon, bacon shots, then some cracking pies that everybody loves.
And how's business? Your customers, do they have as much to spend as they used to?
No, that is the trouble. They're all watching what they're spending now and very worried by the finances.
So what would you like the Chancellor to do? What would help your finances?
I don't think it's got a lot of zero. It worries me that insurance is now well. What does that to everybody? All the region countries' finances are straight, and then give some stable chances for business to increase things on the can increase.
Oh, we haven't got any finances. We just haven't got any money. Some traders and shoppers are buying some market now. We're happy today to split get comfortable managing with it as it was before. So the extra benefits are not that much. So, but the benefits to nations would have been better. Right, Dawn, as I understand, you take the two cuts together from the autumn statement and from this budget, and I'm very sure that's what the Chancellor is hoping people will do. The average saving is about £900, but the higher your income, the greater the saving.
Correct, and this only applies to those who are subjected to national insurance, so those who are below the state pension age. It also only applies to workers, so employees and self-employed individuals, and it really doesn't negate, which I think is the person who was just talking there about they haven't noticed it in their pocket. It does not negate fiscal drag, which is income tax rates have remained the same, and in particular the personal allowance, so the £12,570 that everyone can earn tax-free has remained frozen since 2021, and still remains frozen, and that has a massive impact.
We'll talk about that in just a moment. But a lot of people are getting in touch on that question of who benefits from the fact that if you're above state pension age, you don't. Nick has emailed to say, do the 66 and over working population get anything from the 2P cut in national insurance? It doesn't sound like it to me. It's sort of an eye-rolling emoji. Liz says, so the cut in national insurance is to encourage people to work and reward work. It's nothing for those of us who work towards retirement because we have to or we choose to. Dawn, thank you. Let's talk then about that other key tax, income tax. As Dawn saying, thresholds for that have been frozen since 2021. Here's Darren. Now he works for the NHS, says he pays too much tax, and in fact he's recently started paying more into his pension to move himself down the highest.
There's no incentive to go to that next level because you shouldn't get taxed and you're working for effectively nothing. No incentive for me personally to go up to the next grade because I've been taxed and the extra responsibilities doesn't work out.
Sarah, so Darren earns an incentive to earn more. Dawn's mentioned fiscal drag. Just explain it to us. We know the personal allowance threshold and tax bands. Current plans that they can be so it doesn't have any impact on the community. The problem comes when people get pay rises. So obviously we've had such high inflation, people actually been getting more pay rises. And as your pay goes up, across those thresholds for everyone to be held steady, you go over the threshold. So it means more people pay more tax and more people pay a higher rate of tax. So when I say more, there's about 2 million people who are affected by this. One of the things that is worth bearing in mind, so because you'll benefit from the cuts in national insurance will depend on what you earn. It actually means that lower earners, once you sort of factor in this fiscal drag idea and the national insurance cut, lower earners are actually worse off than they would have been if none of this happened. So it's anyone earning less than £19,000 that's worse off. Whereas if you take someone who's earning sort of £50,000, they're actually £1,600 better off. So massive difference between higher earners and lower earners. And you were chatting to in the market, it's those people on those low incomes who are really struggling right now. And what's interesting is you sort of think of fiscal drag as people being dragged into those higher tax bands. The Office for Budget Responsibility says that from 2028 to 2029, fiscal drag will have brought 3.7 million more people paying tax. So Sarah, just paying tax in the first place. Yes, and the other thing to remember is it doesn't just affect your income tax band. So if you go into, for example, a higher rate tax band, you will then pay more tax on your savings, you pay more tax on any profits that you make from things like investing or from things like selling a second property. So it's effective right across the board if you sort of move into a higher tax bracket. And yes, as you say, there's an awful lot of people who are on pensions at the moment, or relatively small private pensions, when added to the state pension, are now paying tax because the personal allowance hasn't been. When you look at these two things together, the national insurance and the fiscal drag issue, the Resolution Foundation suggests that there's going to be about £20 billion of tax cuts through national insurance rates and about £35 billion of tax rises through those tax rises, through those frozen thresholds. Right, another big change to now is the high income child benefit threshold. This is essentially the point at which a family tends to lose child benefits. Even one parent earns above that. That has been set at £50,000 since it was first introduced. So if a parent earns more than that, it tends to taper off. By the time a parent earns £60,000, it stops to explore that completely. It's meant that more than a quarter of families with children have lost some all of their child benefits, that's according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Go on, big change in that today, that's going to rock.
Yes, I mean, this is welcome. So we've got some short-term increases to the threshold. But we've actually got a commitment to reform the whole charge and the way it works by April 2026. And we don't have the detail on that. We hope there's a consultation with that so people can put forward their views. But yes, the threshold increased to £60,000 and also that phasing out period. So you now don't use the benefit until you reach 80,000. So both of those numbers increased today, and that is welcome. And that
Sean emailed just contacting me regarding the high earnings tax charge. For once, my prayers have been answered. I've been praying about for a change to this tax charge. And Dawn, that other time you mentioned the promise to consult and to change the system. This is to address that unfairness where a single high earner means the family loses the benefit, but two parents, for example, both earning just below £50,000 each.
correct. It's going to be quite hard for HMRC to administer this because we do have the principle of independent taxation. Of course, they actually need to collect household data, and how they do that might be quite a challenge. I mean, prior to 2013, this was not a means-tested benefit at all. Everyone received child benefits, so I'm sure it will open up the whole debate about how
those two things, buying a house or retiring, currently pay a penalty of 25%, which doesn't just take away the government bonus, it takes away some of your money as well. We were expecting to see, saying we're expecting to see that drop to 20%, which would help a lot of people, it would also help first-time buyers who wanted to buy a slightly more expensive property than the scheme allows. So if they wanted to buy something that costs more than £450,000, at the moment they have to pay the penalty, and the hope was that penalty for buying a slightly more expensive property would then drop. Didn't see any mention of it at all in the budget, and it seems there's nothing in the supporting documents either. So unfortunately, we were expecting it, just didn't happen.
So for anyone who's doesn't have a lifetime ISA, these are the tax-free savings or investment accounts. They're aimed at adults under 40. When you open them, if you're under 40, you can save up to £4,000 a year and get a government top-up of 25%, so a maximum of £1,000 a year. And as you say, Sarah, no change. I've had an email from Elaine about that. She says, so disappointed that he didn't change the lease for the LISA to stop penalising first-time buyers who lose more of their savings when they cash it in. Surely because they can't find a home to buy for less than £450,000. Okay, there was though some significant changes this year. There were some changes for Save as well. Sarah, you are allowed to save up to £20,000 a year into an ISA, into a normal ISA. That's going to rise for certain investments through a British ISA.
Yes, so at the moment we're all in a consultation stage with this. So there's nothing happening overnight. There's nothing to get excited about just yet. So basically the plan is to introduce this extra £5,000 allowance specifically for investing in British companies in what's being called the British ISA. Now there's a huge amount to be ironed out about how that works and to make sure that it actually does help encourage more people to invest in the UK without actually damaging huge. One of the problems with it is whether it's going to overly focusing their investments in one place. So there's always a lot to be ironed out, but overall it does mean it will mean this extra £5,000 you can put into an ISA, which has to be a good thing.
I have to wait for all the details to know exactly how it will work. So that's the British ISA. Also news about a new British savings bond.
Yes, so this is it was the thing that came out of the news for us anyway. The National Savings Investment is going to launch a 3-year bond. At the moment we don't know what rate it's going to go. An awful lot will depend on the rate. So sort of often when they launch this exciting green bond, but when the rate matches this one, it was really didn't attract a lot of attention. Now one of the problems is 3-year rates at the moment is twice 4 compared to 2-year fixes. So we might not get much excitement around that rate when it comes out. But the idea is that obviously putting money aside for this British savings bond in order to raise finances to spend on British projects. So we'll have to wait to find out what the rate is and how that's actually going to work in terms of funding. But it is hopefully another source of finance for British companies that are underway.
Lots of people got in touch with Ireland's on the budget. Some people celebrated things like a change to child benefit, but Amanda's been in touch to say how utterly depressing the budget is. Nothing for pensioners, nothing for people paying exorbitant rent, and the pensioner with a part-time job. I don't pay national insurance, but I do pay income. Keep your thoughts coming. Moneybox at bbc.co.uk. Right, Simon, you've mentioned it. Let's dig into it. The budget included pretty significant change to anybody who rents out a holiday home. You currently get extra tax relief compared to private rentals. What is it that's changing?
Well, it's a very documented change. So if you own a property that you let out for holidays, you have been able to register it as a business. And as a business, you could offset a number of expenses against the income that you generated to lower your tax rate. So, for example, mortgage interest, before furniture, etc. And you could have benefited from lower capital gains tax, and by claiming small business rate relief, you may have been able to not pay council tax as well. And that's all been abolished today. The Chancellor said this will help local housing markets, which it may to some extent, but I think the bigger national housing shortage is probably the bigger picture there, and that's the only true fix. If you own a holiday let, I think getting some good advice now is key, and you may wish to consider letting the property now for longer term lease, even perhaps to local people.
Okay, and is this going to make a difference to the number of homes that are available on the market for people to rent to live in, which particularly in this holiday hotspots is such a problem?
I think it's a positive change locally, but I'm afraid I don't believe it's going to be the silver bullet. It's going to help perhaps some existing second home owners look at the percentage.
我覺得太有個人喺度，
That could be done
嗰
very
度
effectively.
轉個牌
But,
高同濕，
I think the housing shortage is
記唔記得啊？
still unsolved.
And Dawn, this change is expected to raise something like £300 million a year, so it does sound like it'll be quite expensive for anyone who's affected.
Absolutely. I think the point is that if you're a landlord, the tax reliefs, as Simon mentioned, have diminished over the years in terms of what you can deduct for tax purposes. If you're a landlord earning £30,000 a year, then you would currently save £4,000. Now that's going to be abolished, so it does make it more expensive to be a landlord.
Right, so let's talk about what is sometimes called sin taxes, alcohol, cigarettes, vaping now apparently. Dawn, there was a pretty big change for this.
Yes, this was widely predicted that there will be a new duty on vaping from 1st of October 2026, so quite a long running actually, which was quite surprising. And also duty on cigarettes will increase as well. So clearly trying to drive behaviour there, and also linked to the environment, there will be an increase in air passenger duty on business class flights.
Now what was quite interesting was that fuel duty didn't rise as planned. I mean, I say it's interesting, it never rises as planned, does it? It's been frozen every year since 2011. It was actually cut by an extra 5
聽唔到。
That was only meant to be temporary, but it was extended last
我哋唔
year.
係麥當勞啊嘛，哥
Now
哥。
it's extended again.
好咯
A big relief though for a lot of motorists.
你話食自己整嗰啲好食啲啊嘛，唔係咩？
Money in the pocket, the average owner of a car will save about £50 each year as a result of this. As you say, it hasn't increased for 13 years, so it would have been very unpopular to do that, particularly in an election year.
In a sense, can you present what you're seeing in the budget?
For me, there wasn't many promises for HMRC, and for many people on their tax bills, they are struggling. There was £140 million promised for debt management, but that was really a drop in the ocean, and service levels remain at an all-time low according to the accountability, so we would have liked to have seen more resources for HMRC.
But the bad news is, which does mean that we've got 35 minutes left for HMRC to do so, and this will be our big interrupted. That is our big question. Huge thanks to everybody who sent in questions. Thank you, of course, to our experts, Paul and Sarah Davis from Harvard's Lines Up. Please register on the That is just the first step. Do listen to your guests. All the listeners, all the detail in your code that's accessible just like if you've got any questions, comments, any financial story you want us to take a look at, please do get in touch. Unbox
Johnson is the chief of fiscal studies at Newton. Next this afternoon, we are addicted to reports behind the companies. It's Christina. That's the question. And it was we will have a burst of Sweet Caroline, where everyone can try this out for themselves. We'll explain more later. Now, I said we look at how we think, feel and behave, so we're starting with a particular behaviour and how it can make us feel. And that behaviour is looking at a screen. Screen time is something we hear a lot about these days, usually in negative ways, that we're addicted to our phones and that social media is damaging our mental health and worse. So we thought what we needed was a proper look at the evidence, and not just at one study, but at what you find if you look across the piece at the best research that's been done on this. What are screens really doing to us? Pete Etchells is the ideal person to turn to, because he is Professor of Psychology and Science Communication at Bath Spa University, and his new book, Unlocked, The Real Science of Screen Time, is just about to be published. And it turns out, isn't this always the way, that we can't just say screens are bad for us because it's all a bit too complicated.
The real science of screen time is really messy and it's really complex, and it doesn't give us the simple answers that I think we're all craving. And screen time feeds into that.
I like the way you say that screen time itself, the phrase, is a dead-end concept. So I like the idea you're using a phrase in the title of your own book that you think is a dead-end concept.
It's a really hard one. I think one of the things that I mentioned
Go on,
earlier
Har.
is this idea of if you think critically and reflectively about even your last hour of screen time. For me, it's reading my book again to remember what I've written. I've looked at Twitter for a little bit, I've looked at my emails. So, 5 minutes here on that, 5 minutes there on that particular thing, all adds up to a very complex single hour of screen time. And I don't know whether that 5 minutes on Twitter might have been good or bad for my mental well-being or not. Maybe it was a bit of both, because even within that 5 minutes, I was doing different things. And that's the point that I'm trying to make in the book, that this is a compellingly simple idea, but ultimately it's meaningless because it doesn't capture that richness of what we're actually doing with our time on time.
Now we've got some questions that all of my listeners have sent in to us. So let's have a listen to this one now. This is from Vania.
I'm interested in knowing whether there's any evidence to suggest that mobile phone use decreases one's attention span, and if so, if there's a threshold.
Nothing they do between now and the election will And the media also noted that talk from the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt of improving productivity in the NHS with new technology had come up before.
And of course, we support the fresh investment in our NHS. Although I have to note that the Chancellor, when he was Health Secretary 10 years ago, promised to make the NHS paperless by 2018. And I know the Prime Minister's fondness for Elon Musk extends to an enthusiastic embrace of his community notes on fact-checking. So I'll say this bit slowly. Labour support of fuel duty-frees. That is our policy. And I look forward to the Prime Minister's acknowledgement of that in coming days.
Keir Starmer there. It was really quite practice in the House actually during the budget. Let us just talk through the economic approach we take. Paul Johnson, Director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Paul, there's borrowing, there's taxes, there's spending, the three key areas the Chancellor sits in front of and has to decide which ones can be squeezed down, which ones go up. Let's talk. So borrowing first. Borrowing is currently about 4% of national income, and that's coming down.
It's coming down over the next few years, actually to historically very low level over that period. I mean, the path hasn't changed much since November, as you sort of expect over a short period. But it is striking in a way that borrowing is coming down to a very low level by historic standards, but that's still only barely enough to stabilise the outstanding debt, which is a way of saying it's a real problem here, which is we can't afford to borrow more.
Now, the only thing I'm ever eating is tofu. Vegetable is tofu, choson, basically just non-meat, non-protein foods. Like,
non-protein food 你會死喎哥。
non-meat foods.
咁你邊度嚇？咁你邊度攞 protein 啊？我哋冇咁多豆腐俾你食。嚇？我哋冇咁多豆腐俾你食啊！冇咗食咯，冇嘢食咯，死咯！我哋唔會睬你嘅，我哋照住我哋自己食嗰啲嘢。點解啊？我大概知道點行，不過如果爸爸行錯路嘅就。
ago, and it's that radio stack they haven't done it 50 years ago. It's very strong. I don't know what that.
Well, it's well, like close to that. All close to that. One of that the first batch I'll be done. We get bigger employees.
Is that we recognise it's a double tax on work. You can pay national insurance and income tax, and get income from other means where you pay income tax. And we've cut it by a third in if you take together the income statement and the budget together. And so it's our ambition, only when the conditions are right, only when it's important to put that in tax to eventually eliminate this. And that is something that we really believe will not just end that double tax on work, which is unfair on workers, but it also will help grow the economy, because we know the house employment, I know we've seen the numbers, the APRs have confirmed that through cutting national insurance, we can increase the hours of work, increase the productivity, and the economies of the country.
She's also there to say, and I think we could argue to be fully honest, that income tax is going up through the freezing of the allowance. Income tax for the activity that the OER said 3.5 million used paying income tax. So income tax is going up and national insurance is going down. So to be honest, this is a change in the tax system. Now the pensioners pay income tax and don't pay national insurance. And that's what will happen if we're going to get rid of it. But then it's essentially to put on.
No, now income tax is the rate system, of course recognise that if people go up in age, then people are sort of nationals. We're not very, very clear that we're not entitled to raise income tax rates at all.
So you are raising income tax, you're not raising it from rents. So we know you're raising income tax because that was built into the plans over this decade. Set out more people will be paying tax, and they'll be paying from more of their income. And that may not even be a real pay rise, that may just be inflation rate rise that drives them into the income tax.
But on that, inflation a couple of years ago, because of the Putin war in Ukraine, went up all across the Western world. Very well. That inflation is unfortunately back down to the levels of 4%, which is going to be a target we hope in the next few months. Now that means that sort of drag that we're discussing will be much less going forward because inflation will back down to target. And so I don't anticipate it being as bad as has been in the last couple of years.
It may not be as bad. I think we should just be quite clear. Taxes are going up, tax burden is going up, more people are paying income tax. This is all part of the plan, and if the plan didn't work, you wouldn't have those tax increases required for it. Let's talk about another aspect of this, like public spending. Lots of experts really check that you can get away with the public spending total. You're giving us a tax cut now on the basis of public spending that imply worse public services than we have at the moment, which haven't yet worked out how to do.
No, I reject that. Let me explain why. The core is, if you look at this part, you raise spending by 3.2% real terms, so after inflation, on public services. And the next part is due to increase by 1% in real terms.
Not per capita, because obviously the population grows globally, but per capita is more or less flat.
Okay, but it's
and 1% increases to finance for people who expect to pay.
But 1% in real terms. But this is the thing. We are investing in improving the productivity of our public services. What matters isn't just the money coming in, and the money coming in does matter. I'm not saying it's irrelevant. But what also matters is making sure that the productivity of every single public service is as high as possible. Since the pandemic, productivity has fallen by 5.9% in the public services. Indeed, the head of the National Audit Office, he has said that if productivity in public services went back to what it was pre-COVID, I'm not saying a sort of mythical time decades ago, I'm saying pre-COVID, it's worth about £20 billion. So what we're investing in is that productivity. My colleague Laura Trott is working on a productivity review to make sure that in every single public service, starting with the NHS, but it's going to go across every single public service, we're going to put more money in to get better outcomes, and that's where you get away with saying spend more. That's where we can improve outcomes at the same time as not continuing just to spend more and more and more. We'll always end up with better outcomes. We've done that in the NHS over the last few years.
Why haven't you done that before? I mean, let's say you can make the public sector more productive. The government thought to do it. Why couldn't you have done that if there was no hanging fruit to improve productivity? That would have been taken years ago. Or have you been, on the job for a while?
Never asleep ever. But what I would say is a fact is that I think since COVID, we've seen a real fall in productivity, and I think that has meant the real accelerated need to really deal with the productivity problem, which wasn't necessarily there as much before. If you actually look back at from 2010 to 2019, in fact, productivity did improve every year in the public services, though by less than what we hoped with the result of our plan. If you look at it from the period before, 1997 to 2010, actually productivity declined by 0.2% a year under the Labour government. So it's something that we have continually tried to improve on, but we're now going to redouble our efforts, spend more money in that productivity. Because I don't believe that just saying old-fashioned efficiency savings will always work. Actually, we've got to put some money in. Well, I think much more out.
爸爸唔識路啊，而家哥哥。哥哥，爸爸唔識路啊，而家。OK 啊。
One of the five sacred things that make sure our national debt is poor.
OK，
Priced into generational income elasticity, meaning that income tends to persist across generations instead of meritocratic growth. This is made worse as the UK tax burden, that is the tax revenue as a percentage of GDP, is currently approaching its highest rate in over 60 years. Not only does this mean that public money has been ineffectively spent, as evident in chronic underinvestment in areas like education, which increase social mobility, but it also further impedes people's ability to accumulate wealth, as they are constrained by high taxes. This effect is particularly profound amongst recent graduates who experience high student loan debt, the repayments of which act as a de facto tax. As a result,
your goal is to bring national debt down, and yet you've got 10 billion to spend on pre-election tax cuts. And I guess I'm puzzled as to how you justify the tax cut when your core, one of your five is hanging in the balance. What is clearly tax? So on that first question around justifying the tax cut, we are not borrowing any more money than we previously said we were going to borrow in this period as a result of this budget. That's really, really what your listeners to know.
Borrowing is coming out of the non-state plan. However, you are borrowing and you are giving us a tax cut. You didn't give us a tax cut. You didn't give us this tax cut.
We're not increasing borrowing. We're not increasing that as a result of this.
But you're borrowing and you're cutting taxes and debt is rising.
Yes,
many people say that's not fiscal culture.
Well, to be honest, if you look at our debt, as a percentage of GDP, I think it's the second or third lowest in the G7. So we are not worried about it. No, of course not. But what I'm trying to say is this is a global problem. We are second or third lowest in the G7. Right, so we're not out of step with compared to other countries. And yes, of course I'm right. It'd be a lot better if every country's debt was much lower. But the war in Ukraine and COVID, by the way, when we spent, I think, about over £400 billion. That does something to your debt.
And that might be an argument for not cutting taxes now, which is what the global authorities like down there, isn't it? Because you've got all of what you just explained, it might take perhaps not a good time to have a tax cut.
Look, that might be right if it was the case. Tax cuts that we have chosen, whether they be full expense in the autumn state, whether they be taking a third off national insurance, whether it be cutting CTE on the higher rate in 2024, these are all tax cuts that are growing the economy. The OBR has scored that if you look at the spring budget last year, autumn statement last year, the spring budget this year, taken together, that increases from what otherwise would be the case by 0.7%. This is all focused on growing the economy. This is not, Evan, this is not, I'm not some sort of ideologue just doing things, for fun. Neither is the Chancellor. We're doing things because we think it's going to make a difference to the economy.
the Economic Secretary to the Treasury. We will return to the budget, obviously, through the programme. Right now, at 27 minutes past 5, we'll have a quick look at some other headlines. At least 5 people have been killed in a Russian missile strike on the southern Ukrainian city of Odessa, where President Zelensky is meeting the Greek Prime Minister. No one from either delegation is thought to have been hurt. The widow of the Russian opposition leader, Alexei Navalny, has called for people to protest against President Putin on election day. Urged voters to spoil their ballot vote on the 17th of March. And a 33-year-old woman has appeared in court charged with the murder of her 10-year-old daughter in the West Midlands. Sheikh Hamis body was found at a property in Rowley Regis on Monday. Thanks, Charles. Nikki Haley, who's been trying to displace Donald Trump as the Republican presidential candidate this year, has dropped out of the race. Donald Trump is the last man standing. Pretty obvious in months. In a speech in South Carolina, Nikki Haley said former president well, but stopped short of endorsing.
It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him. And I hope he does that. At its best, politics is about bringing people into your cause, not turning them away. And our conservative cause badly needs more people. This is now his time for choosing.
Nomia Iqbal is our North America correspondent. Well, I guess this was expected, Nomia. She wasn't going to beat Trump, was she? What happens to Nikki Haley now?
She really wasn't. I mean, she did clock up 2 victories in Vermont last night, and it is, dare I say, pretty predictable. We are going to see a rematch of Donald Trump and Joe Biden in November unless something extraordinary and dramatic happens over the next few months. Their official candidacy won't, however, be declared until the party conventions, which will be held over the summer.
And Donald Trump has to pick a vice presidential person to stand next to him. And I'm guessing not Nikki Haley.
Well, there was a point there where there was much speculation that it could be her, that she might, I think that the view was if he approached her, she wouldn't say no. I mean, Nikki Haley is quite a fascinating person in terms of the evolution of her relationship with Donald Trump. She was once so loyal to him, like you see many other Republicans, but since this primary campaign, they have really turned against one another. She was asked if she would consider being a VP if he asked. She said no. But there are plenty of people lining up to try and be Donald Trump's VP. You've got the tech entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, the South Carolina governor Tim Scott. They both actually ran against Donald Trump for the Republican nomination, but they never criticised him. And so, they're very loyal to him. And there are lots of other people as well. He's not, of course, announced it yet, and as we can expect, Donald Trump will really string that out. He's keeping everyone in suspense over exactly who he will pick.
Nomia, thank you for that. Now, back to the budget. One idea is a new extra ISA, that's a tax-free savings account. You can get an extra $5,000 to invest tax-free. It's your money. You don't get $5,000. You're allowed to invest an extra $5,000 on top of the $20,000 you currently invest if you put it into British companies. That's the plan. Claire Barrett, Consumer Relations, Financial Times. How's this going to work?
Good afternoon, Evan. Well, the true answer is we don't yet know because it's a consultation that Jeremy Hunt has announced. So this is not something that's going to come in from April, like this new savings bond that we're going to see from National Savings and Investors. This is something that's going to take longer. But the idea being it will be an additional £5,000 ISA allowances just for UK companies. Exactly how they'll check and what they'll allow you to put in, we don't really know until the consultation is finished. But interestingly, corporate bonds would be allowed as well as actual shares in UK companies. So there has been a little tickle up in the FTSE 250 index this afternoon. That's the more domestically focused companies in the UK. But more of a rise has been seen in the shares of Hargreaves Lansdown and AJ Bell, the two big companies which will benefit the most if we're investing more. Exactly, the stockbroking firms who hold investments on the platform. Because the thing is, if you invest in a FTSE 100 company, it might be listed in the UK, but a lot of the revenues these big companies, the big miners, the energy companies, consumer giants, the tobacco companies, the revenues that they're making from around the world. So how does
What's a British company? It's not always as straightforward to answer. Right, Claire, while we have you, we need to talk about the child benefit change. Up to now, people earning over 50,000 have their child benefit taken away. And that's been changed in this month.
Correct. That £50,000 is the threshold where it starts to be taken away, all gone by the time you earn above 60,000 from April. The threshold will begin at 60,000 and be stretched out for further, so you'll still get some child benefit all the way up until earnings of £80,000. Now, that is a big and sudden move. It will really benefit single parents, families where one parent works and another stays at home. Eventually, the government wants to move to a household system where they'll take into account what both partners earn. That's going to take a couple of years to bring in. But in the meantime, I think it's highly politically significant that this is the only threshold that they've chosen to thaw today. There's no pressure to thaw others with income tax. I think it's got a lot to do with the fact that in the next few weeks we're going to see the first phase of that landmark £4 billion extension to so-called free childcare hours coming in. There's lots of teething troubles ever with providers, not all offering the 3 hours. Parents being disappointed, charges have gone up.
Grumpy parents when they discover that it's not quite what they thought.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this will help those mid and high earning parents who could stand to be disappointed by those reforms. That's why I think they've done it now.
And if you're earning, if everyone in the household earning below 50,000, it doesn't affect you at all. Claire, thanks for that. Claire Barrett from Financial Times. Now, let us get a look at the moral major scene from Michael Burke, who's here.
Forgiveness makes a virtue out of injustice. So say those currently challenging the Legacy Act, which offers conditional immunity from prosecution for offences committed during Northern Ireland's Troubles. There's a utilitarian case for forgiveness, drawing a line under self-fueling conflicts in Ulster, South Africa, one day maybe Gaza. Also in institutions like the NHS, where removing blame and punishment might make it easier to own up to and learn from mistakes. But isn't it the very fear of blame and retribution that keeps us good people? Where's the justice? Where's the morality in forgiveness? Moral Major, it's a page.
Thank you, Mike. It's 25 minutes. You're listening to PM, a budget PM, and we'll have the summary news from Chancellor.
The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has cut national insurance and announced changes to child benefit, what's likely to be the last budget before the general election. Mr Hunt, who was on his feet for more than an hour in the Commons, told MPs that the national insurance rate would drop by 2 pence in the pound from the 6th of April, saving the average worker £450. The threshold at which child benefit starts to taper off will be raised from £50,000 to £60,000. Other measures included an extension to the windfall tax on the profits of oil and gas companies until 2029. The non-dom tax break claimed by wealthy foreign residents in the UK was abolished, but new arrivals can still not pay tax on foreign income and gains for their first 4 years of UK residency. The Household Support Fund for families in England was extended for 6 months, falling short of charities' hopes for a 2-year extension. Alcohol duty was frozen and the 5p cut in fuel duty was extended. The Office for Budget Responsibility has forecast that the overall tax level will rise to its highest level since the 1940s. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said the budget was the last desperate act of a party that had failed, people saying more and more for less and less. Now the other news, the last rival to Donald Trump for the Republican presidential nomination, Nikki Haley, has pulled out of the race for the White House. Speaking in her home state of South Carolina, Ms. Haley wished Mr. Trump well, but stopped short of endorsing him. The United Nations says 2023 was the deadliest year for migrants since records began a decade ago. 8,500 people died on migration routes worldwide, a 20% increase on the previous 12 months. And the governor of New York State has announced that 1,000 National Guard soldiers and state police officers are to be deployed to patrol New York City's subway network. They'll patrol platforms and check passengers' bags for weapons to help tackle a surge in violent crime.
Thank you, Charles. Just a little bit of news just in. You might have heard that Michelle Donnellan, the Science Secretary, had made a payout to an academic. She falsely suggested
The department has now, in fact, said how much that was. It was a £15,000 campaign. That was possible by taxpayers. Back to the budget. Let's head down to Westminster. A hint of spring in the weather? Is there a hint of spring in the steps of MPs? Are they feeling lifted by the Chancellor's active notice today? Peter Salt, our political correspondent, he's been engaging with me.
So the budget has ended, probably the last one before the general election, and I've come to Portcullis House, the big glass-covered atrium in Parliament. And first up in the queue for a coffee, Matt Warman from the One Nation group of self-styled Tory moderates.
So I think the Chancellor played the hand he's got with some remarkable skill. What he's trying to do is make sure that the people who will benefit most get as much money into their pockets as possible, and while doing that, try and get the maximum number of extra hours worked in the economy. And I think that framing is really important.
So I'll track down another Conservative MP, Brendan Clark-Smith. Brendan, a lot of your colleagues were calling for an income tax cut in this budget. Are you disappointed?
Well, no, not really. I thought there was some very good stuff in there. We've got the national insurance cut instead of income tax. I think you can say that that's actually more targeted at people who need it the most. It was a sensible budget, so there's not too much on there. It's not gung-ho or anything like that.
Sensible sounds like you're damning it with fame praise.
We've seen before, you know, you can make these big pledges and so on, but you've got to be responsible.
So not joined by the Labour MP, Toby Perkins. You got a bit of ticking off during the budget, didn't you, from the Deputy Speaker, Toby? What's that about?
Well, I was just trying to be helpful. I mean, we've got a Chancellor standing there effectively saying you've never had it so far. I just don't think people are willing to listen to our rubbish anymore.
And what's on the Liberal Democrats? The Chancellor turns his eye on not just Labour, but them too, accusing them of having no principles. So here's the Lib Dem MP, Munira Wilson, with her take.
Look, voters aren't stupid. They won't have the wool pulled over their eyes. They know that they're paying a hell of a lot more in tax than they were a few years ago. And small changes today will go a very little way to addressing that.
Peter Paul there, reporting from Westminster. Quite a pleasing occasion. The budget speech in the Commons was Jeremy Hunt making pointed remarks that Labour, Lib Dems and the SNP did quite a bit of finger jabbing as well. The opposition. Let's just talk to Vicky Young, Deputy Political Officer. And Vicky, interesting question for Labour. This Chancellor's patronized people of their ideas to raise money. Now Labour have to say where they'll get the money from if they want to spend extra.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you could say Labour don't really have an awful lot of proposals and an awful lot of concrete policies. But as you say, the ones they do have, well, that, you know, abolishing the non-dom status, they were going to use that to fund breakfast clubs, to put more scanners, CT scanners for the NHS, dentistry. Now, Jeremy Hunt has nicked that and spent it on something else. They say they can rework it and have a look and see if they can still spend that. So it is a problem for them. When it comes to responding to the tax cuts, they have made it very clear they're not going to oppose personal tax cuts. One senior Labour figure said it would be electoral suicide to go into an election promising to raise taxes, so they're not going to do that. They're really looking at the big picture here of talking about economic competence. They think that the Conservatives have wrecked the economy and they're going to try and show that they can be trusted with people's money, which is why they're being incredibly cautious. I think the question for them really is, what are they offering the electorate? Is it enough for them? And let's say, you know, they are almost 20 points ahead in the opinion polls. Is it enough for them just to not be the Conservatives? Or are they going to have to offer a little bit more than that?
Thanks for that. Well, that was really rather good segue into Jonathan Reynolds, who's the Shadow Secretary for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. This is the budget. How do you get out of this, actually? I mean, call it an election trap, they have said. But is it your job to get out of that?
Well, it is, but let's be clear. I mean, this was a dire budget. I mean, this was the culmination of 14 years of failure. The big picture here is a Parliament where living standards have got worse, where the tax burden, despite what was announced today, is still the highest on record.
We've covered all of that in this programme, but I really love this. Exactly what you're doing, because you always have you as the favourites to win the election. And it's your inherent business. It's you who's going to inherit it. And you've got to deal with it. So what are you doing?
Well, look, the Brighton Cross has always been that the economy has to grow more strongly than it has done over the last 40 years, and not all of the things that are necessary
to do that also are about spending money. So planning for the trade course, a big part of Labour's offer, making the Brexit arrangements work better, specific clauses being put forward on that, having our green prosperity plan, our industrial strategy. These are big commitments of actually significant amounts of money where they do exist, but most of all, we've got a chance to offer the kind of stability that business needs to make sure we're seeing those investments in productivity and growth improving. So yes, and I take nothing for granted, but if there was a change in government, it would be most dreadful in hopes in terms of what the figures we've seen today and what we already know about. But that is why we've made economic growth such a priority. And I think, frankly, on some of these things, most of these things, there is only a Labour government can do it. You're not going to get stronger employment rights and homes built and a better Brexit agreement from the Conservative Party. There's pretty obvious reasons for that, but we cannot for that.
Okay, so it's very interesting. What you're basically saying is focus on economic growth, focus on measures that don't cost the public sector, so you only put up taxes and focus on that, get the growth, and then you can reward the public with better public spending, better services. You do, though, at the moment, have some spending commitments. You have also said that you'll always make sure you're spending commitments, civic spending commitments, about fine, tell us how. When are you going to do that? What are you going to do? Because you do now have the spending commitments. You were going to pay for, you say, a non-dom tax. Now you can't because that's going to be by the Chancellor. What are you going to do?
Yeah, look, some of our ideas have clearly been burgled today. That's always a risk when you're winning the argument in opposition. The government just steals them. They want the non-doms. You have to smile. If you look at what certain MPs have said about that, just imagine they'd done this a few years ago and the extra revenue they would have had. But yes, they have taken that. So look, we were going to spend that revenue specifically on investments in the NHS, especially dentistry and some diagnostic equipment. Those commitments will remain. We'll have to find an alternative way to fund those. That will take us a few days. We're not going to talk about this.
Okay, no, but you've actually answered my question. There's a few days.
But don't forget, Evan, as well, we've got other parts of those switch spends, the changes, for instance, for private education, paying business rates and VAT, the change to how income from private equity revenue is taxed. There are still fundamental parts of that, but I accept we have won the argument on non-doms to the point where a Conservative government has said we absolutely could never do this. Has disrupted for us.
It's a good way of framing it, yeah, obviously. I wonder if I can just finish by asking you, perhaps won't have seen it, but the Press Association now say that the Department for Science has said £15,000. That's what the taxpayer paid to cover damages immediately after Michelle Dawson, the Science Secretary, falsely suggested an academic supporting Hamas. What is your view of the principle that the taxpayer is putting that there?
Well, I think this is an extraordinary story. I think we need a clear account of why the taxpayer should pay this, and frankly, what was the Science Secretary doing? Who made her do this? Is this her own decision? It's come from somewhere else in government, and I think, I'm afraid, her credibility is hanging by a thread over this story, and I think we're going to need to hear more from her over the next few days, because it appears, on the facts that we have, a very outrageous situation.
Jonathan Reynolds, thanks so much for that. Shadow Business Secretary. Yes, let's have a last look at some other observations.
The Iranian-backed Houthi rebels say they carried out a missile attack on a cargo vessel in the Gulf region of Yemen. At least 2 sailors are reported to have been killed. The retailers John Lewis and the Co-op have announced they're raising minimum pay levels for workers by around 10%. The Co-op said that it was the biggest ever investment in pay. And a huge fire near Southampton's football stadium has forced them to cancel their championship match against Preston North End this evening. The blaze broke out on an industrial estate nearby.
Thanks, Charles. Now, a very interesting feature of this budget, and indeed the previous couple of statements.
Conservatives were the only major party to be supportive of the North Sea industry. The leader of the Scottish Tory party, Douglas Ross, agreed, decrying Labour's plan to raise and extend the windfall tax on energy firms. 3 of the Conservative Party's 6 Scottish seats at Westminster are in North East Scotland, and Mr Ross had intended to campaign hard on this topic at the general election. That has now been made much harder by the Chancellor's decision to extend the tax to 2029.
I'm going to continue to raise within government, with the Chancellor and others, that this is the wrong choice and urge him to reconsider on that. And when the legislation comes forward to extend it, I'm going to use every mechanism available to oppose that legislation, because I think it's the wrong choice, because we need to provide security and certainty to the sector to invest going forward. And the decision of the Chancellor today doesn't do that.
The trade body Offshore Energies UK says extending the windfall tax means yet more fiscal
risks investment, jobs and growth. The SNP agrees and opposes the extension. The Scottish Greens say climate-wrecking loopholes are built into the windfall tax and they should be removed to support public services and fund the transition to renewable energy.
With his thoughts on the budget, here's our economics editor, Faisal Islam.
The Chancellor is relying on voters seeing their glasses as half full rather than half empty. The picture of living standards growth and inflation remains grim over the past 4 years, but the picture is not as bad as was forecast fairly recently. Inflation falls more sharply. The economy bounces back from recession a little more quickly. Interest rates are lower. The taxes will be cut, or rather, they will rise more slowly than previously planned once the frozen threshold is taken into account. £20 billion cut in national insurance overall gives back just under half what has been taken away by 6 years of frozen thresholds. The net result is that the unprecedented slump in living standards will now recover more quickly. The Chancellor was a little more careful about calling a turning point. There has already been more inflation, and there will be one on the economy, he promised. Jeremy Hunt was trying to communicate that his moves were part of a coherent long-term reform plan, a conscious shift in the tax system to lower national insurance to boost workers. He suggested that eventually NI might even be abolished. He also defended the idea of a squeeze to public spending, suggesting that such moves were achievable, realistic and credible if schools and hospitals and police deployed automation, artificial intelligence and drones. But the same challenges remain going forward. The room for manoeuvre against the self-imposed borrowing limits now extremely tight. Unprotected departments, councils, courts, prisons and social care facing double-digit cuts over the next parliament. There are some glimmers of hope in the forecast, but the tax cuts are built on still vague spending plans, and there will be no spending review detail ahead of the next election.
In the city, the 100 share index ended the day up 33 points at 7,679. On Wall Street a short time ago, the Dow Jones was up 222 points at 38,807. On the currency markets, the pound is trading at $1.27.5 against the euro. Sterling is at €1.16.9. That makes a euro worth 85.5 pence. You're listening to the 6 o'clock news on BBC Radio 4. The main news so far: the Chancellor has used the last formal budget before the general election to cut national insurance rates by another 2 pence. There were few surprises, but Jeremy Hunt has unexpectedly raised the child benefit threshold for higher income families. Labour called the budget a last desperate act, with people paying more and more for less and less. Other news now, and Donald Trump's only remaining challenger for the Republican presidential nomination, Nikki Haley, has declared that she's suspending her campaign. Speaking in her home state of South Carolina, Ms. Haley said Mr. Trump was now the likely Republican candidate for the election in November. She said she wished him well, but stopped short of endorsing him. Here's our North American editor, Sarah Smith.
Scoring one surprise victory in the state of Vermont was not enough. Nikki Haley in a race she obviously could not win. Donald Trump's one last remaining Republican rival could really have ever pleased Haley. She said she was right because Mr. Trump should not be anointed like a king and in order to give Republican voters no choice. Today she told supporters she's ending her campaign.
It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him. And I hope he does it.
Miss Haley conspicuously did not endorse Mr. Trump, and she would never do so. He didn't even mention her in his victory speech, and made no attempt to mobilize his supporters. He's now concentrating on attacking Joe Biden, as the presidential general election was in effect.
Secretary of State was thrilled this weekend to hear that he was facing a court assignment to ensure Republican Sergeant Mass has done well to attract reforms in damages and legal costs for taxpayers who put in $50,000 bill. University of College
advisory group to Stratton said Windsor had sought to make a cheap political point and sue the rival. Market Society said it paid £15,000 to settle the claim, now admitting liability. Established precedent to provide support in matters related to someone's conduct and responsibilities as a minister. BBC was told she'd been questioning an appointment to a public body. Liberal Democrats said having taxpayers shell out for Michelle Donovan's damages and legal costs was nothing short of a national scandal.
A GP who's accused of attempted murder after allegedly poisoning a man in his 70s has also now been charged with making and using the chemical weapon Ricin. Dr. Thomas Kwan, who's 52 and worked at a surgery in Sunderland, has been remanded in custody and will go on trial in July. A judge at Westminster Magistrates Court has given a man a community order for phoning the North London office of Conservative MP Mike Freer to threaten him. James Phillips, who's 46, admitted calling Mr Freer in January to tell him he was coming for him. On the same day, the MP for Finchley and Golders Green had announced he was standing down after receiving death threats and suffering a parcel attack on his constituency office. The chairman of an inquiry into how a migrant boat sank in the English Channel with the loss of 27 lives has told the authorities involved to cooperate and not to drag their feet. The incident remains the deadliest since the crossings began on a large scale. Our reporter Karen May watched proceedings begin in central London.
The 8-metre inflatable sank in the early hours of November the 24th, 2021. The bodies of the migrants were discovered on the French side of the channel, around 10 miles from Calais later that day. The inquiry that began today will try to establish what went wrong and how a similar tragedy can be prevented. Among those providing evidence will be the Home Office, the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. A separate maritime accidents investigation has already confirmed that it took around 2 hours for the UK authorities to reach the stricken boat once it had entered British waters in the Channel. The chairman, former High Court Judge Sir Ross Cranston, said he expected full cooperation from the authorities.
There'll be no place for obstruction or foot dragging on the part of those whose involvement in the events of the 24th of November 2021 will be scrutinised.
A lawyer for the families of the victims said that after waiting 27 months for the inquiry, they wanted an explanation of any failure in the search and rescue operation on the night. So Ross said that while small boat crossings had become politically controversial, his only job was to concentrate on the fatal night in question.
A 33-year-old woman has appeared before magistrates charged with the murder of her 10-year-old daughter near Dudley in the West Midlands. Kay Kang's body was found at a property in Rowley Regis on Monday. Jess Kirat Kaur, who's also known as Jasmine Kang, is due before Wolverhampton Crown Court tomorrow. A group of healthcare workers suing the NHS and other employers over long COVID will have to wait until later